Thank you for listening to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast, available on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Stitcher. Also, please follow Matt's Movie Reviews on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Reddit, Instagram, and MeWe. And of course, be sure to visit mattsmoviereviews.net for the latest reviews, top 10 lists, and more. Now, on to the show.
You'll hear the signal.
I love you more than there are stars in the sky.
You know it.
Wherever you are, Emma, be strong. Be brave. It's up to you. You have to find a way out of the dark.
Mommy, I hear you.
You can help her be strong by being strong yourself.
I wish I had known more when I was young. I wish I had known that the world was bigger than how I felt. Then there would still be beauty. There would still be magic.
Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 529. Releasing May 19 in theaters across the US is Moongarden, a horror fantasy in which a comatose 5-year-old girl journeys through an industrial fantasy world to find her way back to consciousness. Shot on a 35mm camera and created with handcrafted practical effects, Moongarden is a visual marvel with a pulsating heart at its core. A film where fantasy, reality, and memory converge to create a world of dreams and nightmares and emotions both rich and vibrant. And joining me now to talk about Moongarden is the film's director and writer, Mr. Ryan Stephen Harris. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me today.
A pleasure. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for having me. What a wonderful description you gave. I know.
Well, what a wonderful movie. I watched it a few days ago, and it's a movie that's really stuck with me. And I just doing research into the film and some interviews that you did before, you spoke about how the whole kind of genesis of the film is like you really wanted to explore kind of like the dream logic of this fantasy world. It was really interesting to me. What is it about that environment, that kind of fantasy world environment and a whole dream logic behind it that really speaks to you as a storyteller and filmmaker? What is it about that world, that environment that really kind of gets your creative kind of juices flowing?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you asked that. I mean, like, I'm always trying to bring an element of I don't know. I think it speaks to something deep inside, at least me, and it gets at something somewhat spiritual and like that well of creativity or consciousness or whatever you want to call it. Trying to explore that. I feel like cinema, at least, is a really good way to do that because you can use these kind of like brainstem images or things that kind of might mean different things for different people. And without even saying any dialogue, there's very little dialogue in Moongarden. You can tether things together just with images and the atmosphere and the vibe, which is a form of cinema that I really gravitate towards. The first draft of Moon Garden had no dialogue in it. It had one line. It had one line of dialogue in the whole thing. It was 60 pages long, and I'm always trying to actually thin out at least my scripts. It's just how I work with as little dialogue and with the dialogue being as little of importance to the narrative as possible, so that the film can be told very straightforward with images and visuals in a language that I think cinema is really built for. But without sounding too to art with a capital A, that is one of my that is something that I like. I'm really trying to infuse in my own films. So yeah, but hopefully that answered the question without going too off the road. But
No, no, not at all. It's really actually right on track actually, and something another thing that I've heard you say is like you kind of kind of like if you could kind of describe kind of like the fantasy world that you're looking at, you kind of described it as an industrial Alice in Wonderland. And as soon as you do that, like the images converge in your head and like in exactly what kind of shows up in the movie. I'm curious though, when it comes to fantasy filmmaking, there's so many different places you can go to. Did you mess with different concepts or different kind of worlds before going with the industrial Alice in Wonderland concept? Was that something that you knew that that was the playground that you were going to have this film play out on?
So I use that as just like a quick term because it just paints a quick picture in people's mind. Also, a twisted Alice in Wonderland, an industrial Alice in Wonderland. I always, I mean, a lot of people would suggest certain things, and some things are right for the film, and some things aren't. And I think you just have to follow the feeling that you're going for constantly. So I worked closely with producing partner, collaborator, and a talented filmmaker, John Elfers. He was a producer on the film, and we share a lot of the same sensibility. I had production design consultants, Delaray Wagner. My main thing was I wanted it all to be kind of like this broken machinery, everything built out of things that were repurposed. I think a big theme in the movie is that broken things can fix themselves. And so everything should feel like it's been busted, broken apart, but has then been fixed and retooled and built on top of. And also like it was almost excavated from the earth. And I think again, artistically, I just really like that kind of tactile thing where a lot of texture, a lot of grit, and nothing with like super clean lines or anything like that. We also bathed the thing in very specific colors, like keeping away from certain things, but then going all in on like the blue moon cast, and then hitting it with like a bunch of like deep red and emerald. And but yeah, there were things that felt right for the movie, and usually you just know them instantaneously. And then there are things where you're like, this doesn't work at all, and you don't even consider it. And so I think it's just following your own internal compass. People talk a lot about like certain influences, and I always liked Jean Svankmajer and the brothers Coy always had this kind of tactile darkness to it, which I really loved. So there was a lot of influence from like stop motion. People talk about Del Toro, but I do think that's just in the genre. And I have nothing. I love his films, but we were never like, oh, like in Pan's Labyrinth or something. For the big rhino sequence, we did refer to like Terry Gilliam. How because he used a lot of practical shooting to make certain things look enormous, like in Baron Munchausen. And we usually started like, how can we shoot it practically and something real, and then use camera tricks to get there. And so we borrowed from a lot of kind of old school film magicians, like back in the old days of practical effects. And often, even when we had to do something simple, like a POV through a telescope, everybody was telling me, "Oh, well, you just do it in After Effects. It's super easy." And yeah, I'm in and out of After Effects all the time, or Nuke, but it was important to me that we shoot it like, well, why don't we just actually set up an old format viewfinder, shoot through it, project our image on a big 4K television, and shoot through a window with rain on it. So we just built the After Effects project in reality with the layers in front of the camera. And so it was all those kinds of things in terms of achieving what was on the page, which looked and read pretty ambitious to a lot of people, but we knew we could do it if we just focused on one thing at a time and just try to shoot everything and then comp it together, very simple comps. So yeah.
A note that I had when I was watching the film was I wrote down refreshingly old school. It kind of harkened me back to a lot of films that I watched when I was a kid. I remember being in the cinemas watching, Dark Crystal and Neverending Story and Labyrinth and things like that, those kind of films. And a lot of what you're talking about is like a reason why a lot of things come up, and also some of the concepts as well in the film. But also something that's really interesting to me is the shooting on a 35mm print. But not only that, the film that you guys found, you and John, was like you dug that out of some basement somewhere, didn't you? And you're like, this is what we're going to use. We want the grittiness. We want this. It's like, I think what you said was you wanted to be kind of like someone found a long lost film from like the 80s or something, and they flipped it on and you're watching it. And not only that, you guys own your own 35mm cameras as well, which is amazing, quite amazing too. That whole thing of like shooting on 35mm, is that something that you've experimented before when you did the short concept for this movie? Was that something that you shot on 35 as well? And does it take some time really to kind of, after so long editing so many films? I mean, you edited movies like Midway and so many other movies as well. I'm sure a lot of that is kind of like digital stuff and done and will be shown on digital projection. Is it kind of, do you have to kind of like relearn certain things to kind of go back and kind of learn how to shoot and film and create that experience on set, the 35mm experience?
So when I grew up, my mom had a darkroom, and so like I kind of would always go down there into the basement. There'd be this red light bleeding out of the window, or bleeding out of the doorway. And then what would come out would be these like beautiful organic things, So I always kind of grew up around film cameras, and I met my producing partner John Elfers in film school at USC. And we were shooting on 16mm, Super 16, 35. We did everything was shot on film. We were the last class through USC, I believe, to do that. So John and I, it's always been important for us to shoot on 35mm. After I got out of film school, the whole digital revolution with the Red came on, and I shot movies like, immediately on the Red, and it lost a little magic to me. The magic of the mystery of cinematography, and how you put things in front of the lens, how you put things behind the lens, how you fog things out, how use Vaseline to blur the edges, the whole kind of process of doing things real. So it was never a question that we were going to shoot on 35mm. That was always the plan. John had just bought a pair of new cameras, and we decided to shoot a proof of concept for this larger picture that I was hoping to do, this Industrial Alice in Wonderland. We ended up shooting just a couple of days with the actress Angelica Ujoa, who plays the Mud Witch in Moon Garden. And yeah, the footage came out beautifully. We used a film stock that we were also testing. This was a film stock that we had acquired months beforehand. It was a batch of film, 100,000 feet of film that was found in Omaha, Nebraska, in this guy's basement. He had been keeping it, stockpiling it. He had worked on TV. It was all these shows we had never heard of. But it was just this massive treasure trove of old film stocks. There was a ton of slower film stock, 5212 or the 100T, the old Kodak. And so we got it snip tested over at Photochem. And what happens over time, I might have said this other places, but what happens over time is the blue layer on top of the film slowly exposes over time. That's the first layer. So it bleeds into the image. So all the blue bleeds in. So you shoot the footage, you get it processed, and you have this midnight blue putrefying your blacks. So then using contemporary coloring software, you take that, you yank it back into the spectrum that it should be in, you clean your blacks, and then you end up with this hyper grain, super rich image that's full of film anomalies and tons of certain dirt aspects, things that are happening that wouldn't happen if you were just to shoot it normally. So hyper color saturation, which is fantastic. And so with that proof of concept short, we just shot, it was, again, just the Mud Witch doing her stop motion dance inside that big crag. We were able to confirm that this was a usable batch of film stock. And I just fell in love with the look so much. I mean, we shot certain portions on newer film stock. We got batches of film from Phantom Thread, and I just I don't know, it just felt too clean. And I just felt like I've seen it before. And I feel like a lot of things nowadays, just talking to the cinematography, it does seem like, a lot of stuff feels like it's photographed almost by a computer or something. It's so clean and it's so perfect. It doesn't even feel like there's a hand behind it. So I think that kind of plays to the old school vibe of the movie. In terms of the tone, and I couldn't agree with you more. I remember being a young kid and seeing certain scenes in movies that felt like I shouldn't have seen, or seemed like they were on the brink of something that was just well, that was, now it's scarred in my brain forever. I mean, I talked a lot about scenes from that headless princess scene in Return to Oz. I don't know if you've ever seen that picture, but it didn't do well, apparently, because it was
too dark.
a little too it was too dark. But I loved it. I was it felt like something that was just too, that was just on the cusp. It was just too much. And so to me, I always kind of veered towards that kind of stuff when I was growing up for whatever reason. And there's the teeth character in Moon Garden, the chattering teeth that follows him around. That character was actually called Bunyip for the longest time, which is a character named after this one sequence in this weird Australian animated movie, Dot and the Kangaroo, which you probably know of it. Yeah, there's this whole Bunyip sequence that terrified me when I was a kid, and I just loved the idea that it was this thing that crawled out of a sewer, and it obviously took on its own incantation, its own thing. I mean, it ended up being this pair of chattering teeth in this dark void, but the original idea was something that was there to haunt this child. And so anyway, that's kind of where at least the vibe stemmed from. So yeah.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you'll love. The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon. The world's leading online store, Amazon is your first stop to buy a wide range of products at competitive prices with fast delivery times. Amazon is also a world-class entertainment hub that includes Prime Video, Audible, Twitch, Amazon Music, and more. Sign up with Amazon today and experience the best in online shopping and entertainment. Please support Matt's movie reviews on Patreon. Get access to exclusive content, request movie reviews and top 10 lists, and help support my work. Please click on the Patreon link in the description below. So you have your sets, you have your 35mm cameras, and supposedly the lenses of some of these cameras look like big kind of cannons, and you have everything going on in the middle of these rocks. Haven Lee Harris, your daughter, so terrific in this movie. I got to say, her portrayal of Emma is just fantastic in this movie. I've spoken to filmmakers before who's worked with kids, and a lot of times they say working with kids is great because what is acting but the ultimate game of pretend, the ultimate game of make believe, right? And children still have that thing in them where they can do that just like on a flick of a dime, and they could just. I got 2 kids myself, so I see it every day, right? So when she's on set and you're filming with her, what's that like for yourself? Because not only are you kind of like the filmmaker, but you're a parent as well. I mean, it's I'm sure that in some ways, there's a kind of like a clash sometimes will be between the filmmaker brain and the parent brain. I don't know whether they collide sometimes. I mean, I know for myself, I work from home. I have my office here. When my kids walk into my office and I try to write, it doesn't gel that well, right? But what's it like for you as a father to be directing your daughter, who, like I said, is just absolutely terrific in this movie. I mean, just the natural emotions that she kind of brings to it does not seem in any way forced or coerced. It just feels like she's part of the Fantasyland itself, and I think it's just a terrific job by her.
Yeah. I couldn't be more grateful to work with my daughter in the film. I mean, on other movies, you just vanish and you're just gone, and you're gone for 10 to 16 hours a day, And so for me to kind of bring her into it, and she would come like on the weekends or sometimes after school, and we would have built this thing for her, like, oh, today you get to crawl through this big cave, that's soaked in mucus and it's disgusting, and you're slopping around in it, and and today we built you this bungee rig that you get to pull the nostril hair on, and John's going to bounce you around. And it was just, like you said, we tried to build as much stuff for her just to react to, so that she could just come in and be natural. I actually felt like I learned a lot about directing from working with her. The idea of keeping it super simple, and let's just create an environment where you're reacting naturally, and we try to get to something real. I would always tell her we're playing make-believe, but we're going to try to make it real. And so like when she had to get somewhere really deep, she was able to just slide into that. And I feel super, super fortunate, because I honestly believe in my heart of hearts that if we were to have if we were to have done a wide casting call with thousands of actresses, I don't know if we would have been able to land on somebody so. And obviously I'm her dad, but I just feel like she's so natural and she has such a big heart that there are scenes where, it's just impossible not to like break down and go on this journey with her. She was so, and she was so warm and inviting to everybody on set. The hardest stuff that she had, the stuff she had the biggest problem with, and this again just leads to the fact that kids do play pretend, is the stuff where she just had to like lie there in the hospital bed as people were talking around her. And so like the parents would be saying stuff and she just has to lie there with her eyes closed. And that was the hardest stuff for her, because she would often, in the middle of takes just be like, it like sounds too real. And so after a while in the wide shots, we would actually start to just pantomime the scene, then wrap Haven, and then go in for the actual scene with the coverage with the parents. We tried like earplugs. We tried all these things, and that was actually the trickiest stuff. The stuff where she had to do physical stuff. She's a tremendous athlete, and yeah, she's like now on like club soccer teams and doing drama club and all kinds of things. And but that kind of stuff, I knew that she would just leap into it. We would often have certain sequences broken down through montage, and then in the wide, she would just like hop up on the well and get in the bucket, and then we would cut and we would just have it. So there were those kinds of nice surprises, but again, I do feel so fortunate that that I was able to work with her, because we were able to kind of share this experience rather than me like doing it solo or something. Now it's this kind of monument. The whole movie to me is about family and a family coming together. And so it's in a lot of ways it kind of mirrors reality, which was pretty cathartic also. So yeah.
As a parent, I always admire the energetic creativity that children have. My youngest son, Gabriel, he's 7. He wants to be a comic book writer when he gets older, and all he does is draw and make comic book stories. We have scrapbooks. I'm telling you, Ryan, I'll buy him three or four scrapbooks, like 96 pages, and he will fill up the whole thing in a week with stories, and he'll read me the stories, and like it's great. And I know when you were a kid, right, that was something that you loved doing, right? You love to draw all the time and make your own stories. Some advice to me, if you could, please. I want to really, like, I don't want to push him into a career, but I always say to him, whatever you want to do, I'll back you. If you want to do that, I will help you all the way. What's the best way, do you think, that kids can really flourish into really finding their talents? Is it just a thing of just letting go and do it and finding their own way? Or is there something that we as parents can do that can kind of nudge them in certain directions? I'm not really sure, because I'm new to the parenting game by like maybe 10 years.
Yeah, well, like you said, I used to draw all the time when I was growing up. It was my thing. I loved it, and it bled into the whole visual storytelling. I mean, it's all just storytelling, right? So yeah, so the drawings became, I mean, I was a huge comic book fan, did graphic novels, and then that led into like storyboarding for movies and photographs, and yeah, so the arts are all just planets orbiting the same sun, and so fostering any kind of creativity, I always think of like drawing or whatever as just a tool. And you're just, whatever the idea is, you're just trying to get to it in the best way possible. Yeah. So, but cultivating a child's talent, I think, is it's almost like just putting them on the right path and then getting out of the way, Yeah. And then especially like so she's an actress, but she's also in sports, and this is also something that's really good. Like I feel like a ton of things give a lot of life lessons. So if you don't mind, like a parenting lesson, like a parenting tip, I think, so like with sports, I've noticed sometimes there'll be moments where, she'll like get really nervous, or she'll collapse in on herself. And that happens often with theater or drama or something. No matter how extroverted a child is, they're going to have moments where they're afraid, or they have fear, or nervous energy, or whatever. And like we have friend groups, and some parents are like, oh, well, if you blah, 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 then just, we don't have to do that or something. And so to me, it's always been important that if she's afraid, that she knows that it's okay to be afraid, and that it's okay to feel these certain ways. And the important thing is that you still do it. Yeah. Because there's going to be so many times in life where you're afraid, or you're nervous, or whatever, and you have to be able to rise to meet that. And so that's one thing that we really try to instill with her, because to me, that's what bravery is. It's not being afraid. So, there's nothing to be afraid of, to me, is actually kind of a little bit of a poisonous statement. It just leads to a certain kind of mindset, to me. So we try to instill that with her, that it's okay but as long as she's able to confront that and overcome it, then I feel like they can start to build. And then that nervous energy actually starts to be a good thing. It sharpens you. It sharpens you up. You know that something's important and that you really have to perform or do well. And so that would be my 2 cents about at least trying to help a child flourish. But in Haven's case, she's certainly just a natural performer, and it really helps. Also, she's so photogenic,
Mm.
which is another. Originally, when I shot with Haven, we were just doing a little proof of concept. That short that I was telling you about, it was just a proof of concepts, and there was no dialogue in it. So we just had Haven go through this dark forest and meet this figure. And it wasn't until after I saw her on camera and just how gracefully she was, and how eager she was to do it, to jump in, and really just the energy that she brought to the set, that I was like, well, maybe we could do it, like expand this into the full feature with her. So, but yeah, again, I just feel, yeah, very blessed that I was able to do that with her. Also, my wife was involved in it. I mean, it was a whole kind of family and friend affair, like most kind of labors of love are. But I do feel like that kind of has made it this little special thing. So, yeah.
Did you have any parents? So I know you had like screenings at different film festivals and such last year. Did you have any parents talk to you about the parent characters in the movie? Because when I watch the characters, I can really relate to some of the things that are going on there. The dad with the deadlines and everything. I mean, I'm writing all the time. I've got deadlines, all sorts of stuff, all sorts of times. And there was actually a time several years back where I almost quit doing what I'm doing now because my first son was born. I felt incredibly guilty leaving the house all the time to go to screenings and go to interviews and all that stuff. And I was just like, is this the right kind of precedent I'm kind of setting here? So I can kind of understand that and the stresses and everything that comes from that. Had your parents come up to you talk about those characters? Because I think they're important to everything that's going on, because everything that's happening within the child's head is related to the things that she sees her parents doing around her. Even from down to the teeth monster, like or that little story that the father says about something about his grandfather's teeth rattling around the house, like
Yeah,
little things
yeah.
like
She
that.
keeps hearing scratching in the walls, which the
Yeah,
dad thinks is a rodent, but then he plays
yeah,
it like, oh, maybe it's grandfather's teeth.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
and that they absorb that stuff, man. They really do. So, like,
yeah.
did parents talk to you about this stuff as well, like about those characters?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was important for me for the parents to feel for there not to be a clear villain, for them not to just be like, oh, okay, the dad's a bad guy, and like, which I feel like often people will go on that journey. It's interesting because often people that aren't parents, I don't know how to put this, people that aren't parents often will come up to me and be like, oh, I wondered what the problem was with the parents. I'm wondering like
Yeah,
what the issues were. Like I didn't get the backstory of the problems. And to me, that really doesn't, like, they're firing just in two different directions, and they're not getting, the one isn't giving what the other's needing, and the other isn't getting what they need either. And so the dad feels super unappreciated. He's working his ass off, and the mother feels super unloved, like just totally abandoned. And so to me, that's the main issue. All the other stuff is the secondary stuff that's on top. I always thought of the mom as the thematic kind of heart of the movie,
yeah,
where she yearns for the freedom of youth and being young again, and being able to run free, and the romance of youth, and maybe she was too young to be a mom. Maybe
yeah,
that's how she kind of feels. She still loves her daughter, but maybe she's still seeking for this new identity that she hasn't been able to find. And so to me, that's like the root of her sort of depression, and so she just lashes out at everything. And the dad, meanwhile, is trying to hold the family together, obviously with all of the responsibilities of actual life. But I think he started to resent her, and so it's this complex web. And so I always felt like the parents, I just wanted them to feel like somewhat real people, so that
yeah.
there wasn't a clear villain. Uh, it's interesting. All of the dads often side with the mom, and all of the moms often side with the dad.
Oh,
They're
interesting.
like, which is curious. I know,
Yeah,
like a lot of moms will come up to me and be like, "Gosh." the mom just needs to like get her shit together and get up and like do something. And then the dads will be like, God, the dad was such an aggressive dick. And I'm like, okay, those are so it's interesting the sides that people take on, but I think that mostly the main thing is that it's muddled, which I was like, there's clear tension there. Um, and I came from a very loving, supportive family, but every family has those nights where shit spirals out of control and things will
Right.
happen, and the house is just this torrent of volatile energy. And so but yeah, that's the seed of the idea was just one of those nights that just went too far, and that's what kind of spurs the whole thing. And it's and to me, the whole movie is about the little girl bringing the family back together with just this simple kind of magical way that she sees the world. And so but yeah, that's great that you felt that way, because that was something that I was really trying to strive for, was not have there be a clear villain. Like maybe you think the dad might be this like there might be something going on at the beginning, there are tremors of this thing, but then you realize, oh, okay, maybe it's just the mom breaking down, and and then hopefully coming together with this tragedy near the end. So yeah.
Well, I was incredibly empathetic to both the mum and the dad, and I think that's what's really great about this movie, because sometimes you watch films that like maybe will delve down to kind of like this fantasy kind of thing, but they miss the heart sometimes of what's happening. And what this film is so great about Moon Garden is that heart is there. It's pulsating. It's right in the middle of it, and I think that's just what makes one of the many things that makes this film so remarkable. And for everyone listening out there, May 19 in theaters in the US. So from what I understand, Ryan started in New York City May 19 and going to LA, California May 20. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're at the IFC Center May 19th, Friday, May 19th, and then the following week, May 26th, we're in downtown LA at the Alamo Draft House. And what's so great is, I know those early screenings are all on 35 millimeter, and so yeah, I'm just super excited to get it up there on celluloid, and yeah, just have the movie presented in the way that's was meant to be seen. Yeah. So.
And I urge everyone who's listening, if you're in those cities or near those cities, you can get to them, watch this film in the cinema. Make sure you buy a ticket and you watch it where it's meant to be seen, in a place where it should be seen, because more movies are seen like this, and more filmmakers like Ryan can go out there and make movies that we need to see. We need more movies like this, labors of love that are made from the heart for the heart. And I've just absolutely adore this film, Ryan. So everyone out there listening, Moon Garden, watch it as soon as you can. And Ryan, thank you so very much for your time today. It's been a pleasure talking to you. It really has. And when in the future, if anything else comes out, please let me know. I'd love to talk again.
Certainly.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content. Also, if you would like to request a review and support my work, please join my Patreon via the link in the description below.